Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there, to the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers. I'm really glad you're here today. I love this episode. I feel like in some ways, I'm incredibly articulate, and in other ways, I feel like I have the same set of words that I use for every episode, but I honestly mean it. Today's episode, I just finished recording, and I really wish that I had time to process before I recorded this part, but for the sake of time efficacy, this is really what I need to do. This episode is with Jo Beckwith, and I found her on TikTok and social media, and she has an amazing presence. And what I loved is she's incredibly vulnerable and authentic. She's a below-the-knee amputee, and part of her content is about her experience being an amputee, but I think you're just going to love her. She's so open and really shares and talks about things that I don't think a lot of us think about. And it's not all about content about being an amputee. So if there's a part of you that's feeling like, I don't know if I want to listen to this, Jo and I talked about before we recorded that part of her experience being an amputee is relevant. And there's so much more that we talk about in this episode about vulnerability and creativity and being a content creator and what it's like allowing yourself to be seen. And we do a talk about her amputation, and we also talk a little bit about TikTok. But what I say, if you stick with it, is it's really about the process. So with TikTok, we're talking about some of the challenges and some of the benefits, but this is applicable to anything that's in your life. And with the amputation, we talk about she had a goodbye party for the foot that was going to be amputated. And she took the foot all over. I'm going to let you listen to it. But she also had her friends write goodbye things to her foot. It's such a way to honor. And so you may be going like, well, I don't have anything to do with being an amputee, and this is sad. She is so incredibly inspiring. And anybody that's experienced any type of loss, look at COVID, how much loss have we experienced? So you may be thinking like, I don't want to hear about TikTok and I don't want to hear about an amputee. If you listen to the process and not get stuck on the content, this is relatable to everyone. She also talks about what it was like being seen in public and having people stare and some things that people said to her. And if you see somebody that is different, should you say something? Should you not say something? How can you approach them? She talks about some things that people have said to her. I just think it's an amazing episode. And when I'm done recording with people, we usually process afterwards. And I guess I did not make that clear. So when we say goodbye at the end, my program processes what's going on. And then she was gone, and I felt really sad. I was really looking forward to connecting. So I called her back, but I think she went on to something else. So Jo, I was sad we couldn't keep talking because it was so delightful and totally yummy. If you're interested in getting the top 10 most downloaded podcast episodes, you can go to the show notes or go to my website at unapologeticallysensitive.com. I also have a survey for the listeners of the podcast that will help me get to know you a little bit better. I would love to hear from you, about you, for you. Hopefully, I'll be getting my newsletter together soon. Let me tell you a little bit about Jo. Jo Beckwith is a public speaker, advocate, YouTube creator, and amputee who passionately believes in the incredibly perseverant capacity of the human soul. We may not have the exact same life experiences, but Jo knows that as human beings, we have the unique capacity to help each other heal and grow by sharing our stories. And she is an amazing storyteller. I really think you're going to enjoy this episode. And now, on to the show. Hey, Jo, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited about talking to you today. I found you on TikTok, so we jumped on a Zoom call just to kind of get to know each other, but you are known as Footless Jo on TikTok.
I am.
You want to explain why?
Yeah, especially if you're listening without any visuals. I am a below knee amputee, so I'm missing a foot. I am less 1 foot. And a couple years ago, when I had to go through this whole process through losing my leg, I decided to kind of really start focusing a little bit on social media and sharing my story. And I decided that Footless Jo would be a good name to go with, so I went with it.
I love that. Let's just take a step back. Do you identify as a highly sensitive person?
Yes, I do. It's something that I'm still learning about. It's a concept that I've recently become aware of. And the more I look into it and the more I understand it, I very much do identify that way.
Yeah. I just found you on social media and was so captivated by your honesty and your authenticity and your sense of humor and your depth. And I often don't know if people are highly sensitive or not. And it's not a strict criteria. You just have to be a good fit. But then when we talked and you said, yeah, I am, I'm like, yeah, I'm not surprised.
You kind of pick up on it, I think, with some people.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to start with the goodbye party that you had for your foot. I just thought that was such an honoring and beautiful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you who don't know, I fell off a horse when I was 13, shattered my ankle, and it led to a lot of surgeries and procedures and mounting pain for the next almost 15 years. And so I was faced with kind of the decision to keep the status quo and still be in a lot of pain, take more and more pain medication for an ankle that was really messed up with no good options left, or consider amputation at 27. And that's a very bizarre decision process to have to go through. It's not really anything I ever planned for or could plan for. But as I made that decision, I decided that'd be the best thing for my quality of life. I had a couple weeks left with my foot, with my ankle. And I thought, I'm obviously going to be able to feel things on my other foot. But this is the last time I'm ever gonna have feeling in this part of my body. And even though it hurts a lot, I kind of wanted to honor it in a way because it served me well while it was with me. And so I took it on a little goodbye tour around my town and around the state. Like I, felt leaves on my toes and stood in snow, even though that's not super comfortable. And like had, some of my animals lay on my feet and felt their fur and their warmth, and walked in the rain and things like that to just really focus on those sensations and be grateful for them. It was a really therapeutic thing to do. I don't think I even realized how helpful to me it would be, but it was great to thank it for its service and break up with it.
And then you had friends over too. And what did your friends do?
Yeah. So I had friends over the night before my amputation. I invited them over to write in Sharpie a goodbye message to it. So I had about 5 or 6 really, really close friends who came over and wrote a variety of things. I wrote a breakup letter on my ankle to it. One of my friends said, "Goodbye, little piggies." There was a variety of little messages. And then it was also good to make sure that the doctor didn't cut the wrong one off, right? I even put like little dashed marks with a little scissor just so I could, kind of mess with the surgeon in the OR. I'm sure that was odd looking to him. But yeah, I went up to Denver to have my surgery just covered in messages on my little ankle.
Yeah. And what I love about that is so honoring. You really, whether it was conscious or on whatever level it was, this thing of, I'm going to be saying goodbye to this foot. And so I want to have all these experiences and have a party, and everybody's going to write something to my foot. It's just so honoring. And I don't even have the words for it, but it's like the spirit of hope in that, but also acknowledging the loss, the goodbye letter. It is a loss. Yeah.
And I think that was a big part of it for me, is even though I didn't know the extent of what I would feel or how much of a loss it would be to me or what the emotions would be, I knew that it was obviously something significant. And I didn't want to just let that go by unacknowledged, because it's a part of you as much as anything is very physically a part of you. And it was going to be removed from me and gone forever. And there was definitely some grief in that, but also, it was time for it to go.
Right.
So it was a hopeful thing for me too, and a thing of gratitude.
I know that you connect with other amputees. Is this something that you talk about with them? Is this something that's common? I mean, I worked in a hospital for 9 years and I worked for home health for 5 years. I feel like it's stuff that I've been exposed to, but I don't think I've ever really heard anybody talk about really celebrating and honoring an amputation.
Yeah, I think I was in somewhat unique position of knowing exactly when it was going to happen. It's called an elective amputation. It doesn't mean you actually elect to have it because you want it and it sounds like a good time. It means basically that it's not a trauma related injury, or it's not urgent to save your life. So I got to pick the date, right? Not everyone gets that opportunity. of the people that I've spoken to who are elective amputees, there is another one that I know that actually ironically did something really similar. She drew pictures on it. She took like watercolor markers and drew on it, and her mom helped her too. And so we did very similar things with that. But I do think I have a tendency of trying to just muscle through things and power through things and not feel what I need to feel, because it can be overwhelming pretty quickly. And heading into losing my leg, I was concerned that I was going to approach a life-changing process that needed to be felt and grieved as if it was nothing, because that's kind of a pattern that I have. And I made the decision, I'm not going to do that this time. I actually want to take time to honor these moments and feel as much as I can with them. And if I was talking to someone who was facing an amputation of any kind, I think finding something that means something to you, if you feel that way, is a wonderful thing to do. Now, there are definitely people who are like, this thing has been hurting me forever and ruining my life. Screw it. I'm done with it. And have absolutely don't have no need to honor that part of themselves. And I can respect that too. But I think for a lot of people, it could be something that's really therapeutic if you have a little goodbye party in your own way.
Right. And for those of you that are listening that are thinking like, I'm not an amputee, this doesn't relate to me, just substitute amputation for loss. During COVID, everybody is experiencing some kind of loss, whether it's the loss of freedom to go to the store without wearing a mask or whatever that is. If it's a change in a relationship, we experience so many different levels of loss. And during COVID, especially, there's all kinds of losses. So even though Joe is talking about amputation, this pertains to everybody. And it's really about how we approach change. And do we embrace it? And do we feel the feels? And do we find a way to navigate through it? Or do we just pretend like it's not going on and kind of compartmentalize, put all that stuff in a box and not really deal? And I think that's what just attracted me so much to watching your TikToks and seeing you on social media, is that you just really embrace what is. And I don't know. So I guess my question to you is, how was it for you going through the process of the amputation with the approach that you had? And how do you think it would have been had you not done that?
Yeah, I think it was very instrumental in how I've been able to go through the last couple years and how I've been able to frame things and experience them. I was very aware of the fact that, like I said, I tend to underplay things, don't want to feel them. Let's just get through it. It's too overwhelming. It's too painful. I'll just not, And I really wanted to fight that tendency in myself. And so I think setting the stage with starting by doing something that was a little bit emotional and fun and great and, full of gratitude, but also grief, helped me frame how I was going to go through the rest of this, not treating things as if they were nothing, taking time to feel what I needed to feel about some serious loss and not be as surprised by some of the emotions that I was having as I might have been. I think it also helped me realize the weight of what was happening, because you can't, at least I couldn't picture what my life would look like as an amputee. It's very different than what it looked like with two meat feet, as I like to call them. But yeah, I think it assisted me in the grieving process that I've gone through, and to some extent I'm still going through.
Sure. Did you have a social media presence before the amputation?
I did, but in a very different way. I had another channel. I had a YouTube channel. YouTube is what I focus on primarily, where I talked specifically about mental health and some experiences I had in my past and just working through those. But it was just something that I've done, and I've continued with it because it was very therapeutic to me. It really helped me. I was able to connect with other people. I loved kind of feeling the empowerment of being able to share my story and use my voice and get comfortable with that. But it was never anything that I expected to or even needed to go anywhere, right? Like, it was just something I really enjoyed. And when I realized I am very seriously considering chopping off a body part to make my life better, I started filming myself as I was thinking through those things, because I realized with the work I had done previously with like mental health videos that it really helps me make sense to myself if I put things into words for other people. So I made a number of videos, and I didn't know if I was ever going to publish them, just thinking through this process and, okay, I'm going to see this surgeon today and he's going to have this kind of answer. And how do I feel about that? And I talked to my parents today about it, and here's what they said, and just going through all of that. And when I decided I was going to go forward with the amputation, I published those videos, I think a couple days before surgery. And my honest thought was, on the off chance that there's one person in the world who's ever in a similar situation, okay, maybe this thought process will help them. And I thought of it as like who faces this, right? Like, it's like, this is such a rare thing. It's actually not. It's a lot more common than you'd think. I've met so many people who are in similar positions. But then I went through the surgery and going through the recovery. I continued making those videos, and they gained an audience, and then they gained a lot of attention through a variety of different ways. And I have continued making videos, once or twice a week for the last 2 years through this whole process. And I think it is also, so being on social media I know a lot of people have very negative experiences with social media, and I definitely have had those myself. But overall, it's been such a gift because it's helped me stay honest with myself and process through things and practice vulnerability with other people. And also, I think, invite that connection. So I didn't really do a lot with social media before all of this. And now it's the majority of what I do.
Yeah. So there are two thoughts that I have. One is, what is it like allowing yourself to be seen? Do you feel like, I'm all over the place here, and there are 2 squirrels outside my window that just had a fight that made me jump. And so I'm also a little
oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I have a bird feeder. And so it's fascinating. But when I'm actually working, it's distracting.
Yes.
So your YouTube channel before you had the amputation it's about some of the trauma that you've experienced.
Correct. It's on a different channel, but yes, it was about trauma that I experienced.
Okay. I know that we had talked about we weren't going to go into the trauma, but then you didn't mention it. So I'm like,
oh yeah.
We can say trauma. We're just not going to talk about the trauma.
Yeah.
Did you find the same or a different level of vulnerability once you started thinking about having your amputation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, yes, the way that I experienced and had to play around with and face vulnerability definitely shifted, especially facing something totally new and doing that, being vulnerable about something as I was going through it, as opposed to what I'd done previously, which was mostly talking about things that had already happened and how I processed them from a much more processed, safe sort of mental place where I knew what I was talking about to some extent. At least I had the beginnings of an idea. I knew what I wanted to communicate. It was very different doing that, which is more reflective than this just happened and now I'm talking about it and now I'm sharing it.
Yeah, it's a huge thing. And I think that there's such a gift when we're comfortable allowing people to watch our process as we go through it. Yeah. I think it's so powerful, not only for the viewer, but tell me about what you notice for yourself being able to be present to your own process.
Yeah, I really like that phrase, present to your own process. I think it has kept me honest to participating in this process for myself. It's really easy to hide from things, as I've mentioned before, and taking people along the journey with me, people who I know are more than just comments on screen, some people I've talked to in real life who found me online, and that connection, I never would be okay with lying to people about what I was experiencing or what I was going through. And yet somehow I was previously okay with lying to myself about what I was, experiencing or going through. And so doing it for other people made me very aware to be honest with myself about where I was and to not exaggerate things or underplay things, and to take time to reflect, to take time to be present in what I was feeling. And I think that's been so beneficial to me, because instead of having a whole basket of things to process 5 years from now that I just, got through and survived, and there's a lot to be said about getting through and survival. Like, those are very good things, but to be able to be present and more aware of what I was feeling, what I was experiencing, and trying to put that into words as I was trying to figure out for myself was very grounding for me.
Right. And what I'm wondering is what I heard you say is, lying to myself. But for me, it's not that I'm lying to myself. It's just that stuff is floating around. And when I name it, it brings it from the subconscious into my consciousness.
Yeah.
What it sounded like you were saying is I did it for the listeners or for the viewers to keep me honest. But what I'm wondering is if it wasn't more of stuff was floating around, and because I talked about it, I filmed about it, it brought it into consciousness. And so I heard myself. So I honored myself and I was aware of what was going on. Is there any truth in that?
Oh, I think there's a lot of truth in that. I am a big believer in the power of using your voice in whatever medium that is. And I think what you said actually hits on what I felt for a long time, that when I put things into words for other people, for in quotes, for other people, or even when I just put things into words at all, suddenly they become tangible and a little more manageable, as opposed to just an overwhelming feeling or numb or something else. So I think what you said is actually very accurate. And I like how you put that, because I've not thought about it like that before.
Yeah. My guess is that you're an extrovert.
I am not.
Well, a highly sensitive extrovert is different than a non-highly sensitive extrovert.
Oh, do tell. Yes.
For me, I really like connecting with one person or a very small group of people in a very specific venue for a very limited amount of time. I need to have my time to recharge afterwards. If I don't get enough contact with people, I get depressed, I get listless. If I get too much, then it's not good. But I don't like big groups. I don't like loud parties. I like it to be meaningful and intimate, but that sense of connection is really important for me. And I'm a verbal processor, which is what I was picking up on, that I think some of us that are extroverts tend to be verbal processors. So being able to talk through something helps me figure out where I'm at.
Yes, exactly. Actually, what you described, I think, is very, very accurate, because I love meeting someone for coffee. I love sitting down with, two friends over dinner or being at their house for a bit. That really matters to me. And I've focused on that, especially in the last year or so, realizing that, like, oh, when I feel disconnected from people, depression gets real dark and scary really quickly. And so focusing on connection with people, but I do need that connection. But the larger the group of people I'm around, the more quickly I check out and get exhausted and get migraines and have to stay home for a day. And so I think it's just I just get overloaded by it pretty easily, but I do love communication and connection and all of that. So you might be onto something with that.
It really was a game changer. Much of what's written about introversion really is about the highly sensitive person. So I thought I was an introvert, and then I learned about the trait. I'm like, holy moly, this is this is not what I thought it was. It's something different. And I would take time to be alone because I thought I was an introvert, and then I'd get depressed and I didn't understand why.
Yeah.
And so really finding that sweet spot of how much is enough without being too much is really, it's an ongoing work in process. But but that verbal processing is the part that I often will tell my husband, like, I just need to talk out loud to figure something out. Yes. Because that's how I solve problems, is by talking about it. But like my poor husband, I just got some kayaks. And so it's been a process about, getting the racks for the cars and the tie downs and how do we do all this stuff. And he's sometimes had kayak fatigue, which means like he's really not in a place to hear any more about the kayaks, or he'll listen but doesn't have a lot to say. So do you have kayak? Right. So with my friends, I'm like, if you're getting kayak fatigue, it's okay. But I'm really, and I just want to talk about every little nuance around the kayaks and tying them down, and
Oh, that's awesome. Kayak fatigue.
Kayak fatigue. Yep. How has it been for you allowing yourself to be seen? Because that's a huge thing. And I don't know if you need to go back to think about when you first started your YouTube channel, but it's a really big process and very vulnerable when we go from this place of being very private and then we put ourselves out on social media, and to whatever extent. I mean, I think there's a whole process around that. What's your thought?
Yeah, I think that hits such a deep chord in me, that idea of being seen, because all the work that I've done online through videos, through social media, has really been about that, because I've always spoken about very personal and deep things, at a level that I'm comfortable, at a level that I think is appropriate to do so. But it's all very exposing. It feels very vulnerable and very, I don't want to say unsafe, but like emotionally, sometimes it'll feel very unsafe. And one thing that's funny to me is that I've been doing this between talking about mental health and previous experiences and trauma and going through amputation, you'd kind of think that I might, at least I'd kind of think that I'm like good with vulnerability at this point. And it couldn't be further from the truth. I still get so nervous whenever I'm talking about something that's actually personal or really meaningful to me. I'm like, no one's going to care about this. This is too much. Why would I do this? And I whenever I do put it out into the world, I'm always very grateful that I do, but I almost feel like there's vulnerability backlash that I'm like, I know this is a good thing to do, but then I get terrified once I've done it because people see me and they see something in me that could be perceived as, weakness or any variety of things. And it's terrifying. However, on the flip side of that, I do think it has probably been the single biggest part of my healing, because hiding is a very natural human response to a lot of things, especially things that hurt us. And when we've been hurt, consistently, it makes sense to hide in whatever variety of ways that we do that. But making a choice to kind of come out of that darkness for myself, regardless of who saw it, it was really for me to do that, was so healing, because then you realize you're really, really not alone. You're not nearly as weird and messed up as you thought you were. There are other people out there who feel the same way and want to connect with that. And it's such a connecting thing, especially being someone who feels pretty easily disconnected. Taking the risk and letting myself be seen has been one of the best things I've ever been able to do in my life. And I'm really grateful for it. I feel like it's a practice. I don't feel like it's something anyone ever really achieves. I feel like it's something I'm going to continue to work on forever. And that's great.
Yeah. Brene Brown talks about having vulnerability hangovers, which...
Oh, that's a better term for it. I love it.
Early on, I would get nauseous if I did a podcast interview. Before I even had my own podcast, I would get incredibly nauseous. And then when I started doing bonus interviews talking about personal things, a couple times I would send it to a friend or somebody to say, is this too much? Should I be sharing this much? And then that feeling of what are people going to think or say about it? And I think that when, again, this is Brene Brown, but we've got this shame that our gremlins that tell us that nobody cares. You don't have anything to say. Why would anybody want to listen to you? And when we name it, it's like we're not identified with it. And I've shared a couple times about being on a walk with my husband. I say something and he says something, and I can watch myself just circle the drain so fast because I'm so identified.
Gosh, yeah.
So we walk and I know better to say anything, and I'm quiet until we're almost home. And then I'm able to gather some words. And then once I can share what's going on, I'm not identified with that, circling the drain, because I'm able to go hey, I'm having a reaction. And this isn't what you were saying, but this is what I felt or what I heard, or the story I made up in my head.
Yeah.
That breaks the shame and that creates connection, and we're wired for connection. And so everything that you're talking about is that tightrope that we do between vulnerability. And for me, there's something called high sensation seeking. And so I'm not going to go jump from a plane because that's just not my thing. But with vulnerability and risking, it's kind of exciting, to kind of go into what's going to happen if we go there? It's a little thrilling. It's a little exciting.
Yes.
So that's where that shows up for me. But I think it's so powerful. And like you said, it's not anything that you ever, a lot of things I'm much more comfortable about talking about because I've gotten friendly with the parts of me that I'm not so crazy about. But as I talk about them, it's I get irritable. Yeah, I get cranky. Yeah, I circle the drain. Yeah, I reactive.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that's a beautiful process to go through. And you get more comfortable with it. It's like the charge behind it gets lessened the more you are able to put something into words or name it for yourself or whatever it is, that emotional reaction or that shame that overtakes you. I feel like, at least in my own experience, sort of starts to gradually, it's not as intense the next time. And so it's a long process of working through that, but it's a beautiful process, one that I would highly recommend.
And, when I saw you on social media, because you're so comfortable with what goes on with you, I'm it was very attractive to me. And as we get to know who we are and we're okay with ourselves, and I can show up and be authentic and vulnerable, and you see that part of me, that's what draws people in. And I think we have this idea that sensitivity is weak and vulnerability is weak. It takes so much courage to be authentic and vulnerable and real. It really takes bravery and courage. And it means that I want to credit, this is Brene Brown stuff, but to go into that place of uncertainty, I'm going to open up and tell you something, and I don't know how you're going to respond. I don't know how this is going to go, and it's uncertain. That's where we get the connection and the depth and the meaning. And I think so many people today are just craving that, which is probably one of the reasons why social media in some ways is really powerful. I think about TikTok as a whole new, it's so different than the other forms of social media. And there is so much vulnerability and honesty on there, raw honesty in 1 minute.
It is. Yeah. Seriously.
Yeah.
It's been really interesting to watch how that works, especially because it has a younger demographic, and how the younger generation, I feel like they're doing a better job than my generation anyways of expressing things and maybe being a little bit more vulnerable. And I think it's really cool to see.
Yeah. Even women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, not wearing makeup, not having their hair done, just showing up and talking really vulnerably, that it's just so different than anything I've ever experienced before. I mean, what's been your experience with TikTok and how it differs from, because I know you're on Instagram, I know you're on YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to condense something meaningful or, funny or silly or light, but especially meaningful down into 15 to 60 seconds. It really makes you think about what you're saying and how to communicate it. And I think it kind of hones communication and engagement skills. But this might be, a little bit beside the point, but I've also noticed that the reaction that people have had to my content on TikTok has been extraordinarily positive as far as comments. People are really encouraging, really inquisitive, but are always like, hey, is this okay to ask? Even though I'm like, yes, ask me questions. They're very open about the fact that I'm okay with that. For the most part, people have been so kind and very generous in their words and very supportive, where that has not always been the case on other social media platforms. And I think other people have very, very, very different experiences with that than I do. But it's been nice to have. I feel like it's just fun for me. Like TikTok is just somewhere where I can just express, and I don't have to think about the YouTube algorithm or how this is going to work. I don't have to make a thumbnail for it. I don't have to, do a whole lot more. I can just play around. I can just play and have fun with it. And I'm really grateful for that. And I love, what I like doing the most is either public speaking or sort of longer form speaking in videos that are 8 to 10 minutes, where I can really kind of get into something. But it is fun to play around with a different medium where you have to compress it quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm still really working on getting content down for a minute. And what I'm thinking that I need to do is to just challenge myself to just get on every day and do something. But
yes,
I have all these reasons why I don't. And my favorite place to do it really is on the water, on the kayak. But those are days that I don't shower. My hair's not done. And, I wear a hat. So there's a strap going under my chin. And then I've got my mask, which is on a strap. And then I have my sunglasses on. I feel like I just look so janky.
Maybe that's exactly what TikTok needs.
The janky kayaking therapist.
Yes, I love it. Perfect.
But I know it's that thing of, I'm trying to figure out content, and it's so different than what I do. And I've had so much insecurity. And because brevity is definitely not my forte, it's just been this whole thing of how do I think about content differently and how do I create? And you and I had talked a little bit about this offline, that how do you schedule when you're going to create media and things like that? Or do you do it? Because I'm taking this course right now and it's talking about this very structured way of creating content, which in some ways is helpful to have an outline, but I tend to be a fly by the seat of your pants type person. That's how I harness my creativity, or that's how it harnesses me.
Oh my gosh. Yes. We are the same in that. I've watched, countless how to be good on YouTube videos, or, running social media or content creation. And the consistent line that everyone says is, have a schedule, stick to it, pick Monday, Wednesday, Friday that you're going to be filming or writing or taking photos or whatever it is for you. And then, have your editing days. And I'm like, that's great for other people, but I cannot for the life of me do that. I can't. If there's something that I want to talk about, and maybe this is something to work on and maybe it isn't, but if there's something that I want to talk about, I need to put it into words that day, at least, to be able to express it the way I wanted to express it, and for it not to sound not rehearsed, but for it to sound authentic and formal, because it is in that moment. And, I think sometimes that kind of bites you, because it'd be really nice if things were planned out for weeks. It'd be really nice. But creativity just doesn't work that way for me. I'm creative right now. I might have 3 really awesome days where I just do absolutely everything. And then the next week I'm like, there's nothing there. And, there's nothing.
Yeah. And my guess is this is similar to you, that I find that when I'm really upset about something, when I'm very passionate, that's the best time for me to sit down and record, because I want to process it out. And if I wait until I'm through, then it's not exciting anymore. And like, I'm over and I'm on to the next thing. And so I really,
Oh yeah. And if I'm bored with it, then everyone else is going to be too, right?
And I really felt like there was something wrong with that it was, I was being like, I can't even think of what the word is, like not responsible, because I was sitting down and recording in the moment when I was really upset. But I seem to be able, I probably because of my upbringing, which was to not be very emotional, to be very analytical and controlling. So I tend to be over controlled as opposed to emotionally dysregulated. I internalize that. So it goes on. You just don't see it. You just don't see it.
Oh no, I understand that. I get it.
So I really am gifted in the ability to be incredibly upset, but to sit down and talk coherently through what's going on. But if I wait until, I'm not charged up, then I'm not interested in it anymore. And it's just not something to talk about.
Yeah, seriously. I think there is, obviously I think there are pros and cons there, but I think there is a real power to that, especially because, as you mentioned earlier, I think the world is really lacking in connection. I've definitely felt that. Pretty much everyone I've talked to about that has felt that. Authenticity and vulnerability are really hard to cultivate, and they're really hard to find, and they are a gateway to connection. And I think we censor ourselves, especially on social media. Things are generally very edited, very put together. Everything's in the right place. Your room is organized at least mine is when my room will like be organized behind me, but maybe not in front of me. Like it's very curated, right? Like you curate a certain kind of image, and that can be awesome for certain things. But I think there's a lot of power in showing up actually where you are, so frustrated or vehement or, really upset about this thing, because people can feel that. Because we all feel that, whether or not we're comfortable with it. Seeing and feeling and understanding that someone's in those emotions at that time and really feeling that, I think it's an invitation to be okay with that yourself. And I love that.
Yeah, I think it's such beautiful modeling. And that's part of what I see you doing, is that you model, I'm struggling. This is what's going on. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I get through it. It's stuff that a lot of us ideally would have gotten when we were children, that something happens and our parents put words to it. I mean, even to babies, I know you're hungry. You're really angry right now. You're really upset. You really want to go do this thing and you can't. That's how we learn about our inner experience, when somebody puts words to it and creates language. And many of us didn't get that. And so I think that's also one of the benefits, that for people that are aware of what's going on and are willing to share their process in a way that is healthy and vulnerable, we're modeling to other people how to show up and be authentic, how to identify feelings, how to go through difficult things.
Oh, and I think that's huge, because so many of us, like you said, didn't have that or don't have that. And I have had the gift of finding people like that. Brene Brown's a huge one for me. When I found her, a lot of stuff started unlocking for me. And I can think of a wide variety of other people to actually show it, to be a model for that and not just talk about it, I think is so, so, so powerful, and does take, at least in my experience, I think oftentimes takes intentional work. Especially if you weren't brought up that way, especially if you weren't given the words and the tools when you were a kid, it takes some time to sort of dig in and access those and figure out how to put it to words. And I've had other people do that for me and help me with that process. And I'm so grateful for that. And it's something that I would be honored to be a part of for anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very powerful. I hadn't really thought, I know I like TikTok. When I first got on it, it was like crack. I was so addicted.
Oh my gosh, I know it does that to you, doesn't it?
And this was pre-COVID, and I didn't want to tell anybody what it was, because I felt like I didn't want anybody else to get addicted to TikTok crack. And then the pandemic started, and then it was just a great place to get relief. And then I got on political TikTok, and then it was really stressful, so I deleted my account. And then when I got back on, they talk about different sites. I was on plant and dog TikTok, and so it
Oh, perfect. That's amazing.
It took a while to kind of find myself back to my people, and I couldn't remember who I had followed. So there's still people that I haven't really gotten back to in my feed, but it's really, I think for people to do research, or that are sociologists, to see some of the benefits of TikTok, because it really is very, very real. And like you said, it's not curated. I don't know. I'm just kind of fascinated with it.
Yeah. I've almost noticed that some of the more like curated, put together, perfect content doesn't do as well, nearly as well. Like when everything's exactly the way that it should be. I mean, for some people that works, but the videos you see there are generally just people being people. And I love that.
Yeah. And I have to say that during all the protests, I really felt like I had access to the underground. The things that I would see on TikTok of people that were actually at the protests, taking pictures with their phones and talking about it versus what I was seeing on the news was very, very different. And I felt like I had, I have a contact to the underground of what's really going on as opposed to what the news is telling us. And I really had a deep appreciation for that.
Oh, oh gosh, yes. Same here. I had that same experience. And I was like, these are actual people sharing things. It's not just the media with the headline that gets a lot of clicks that may be a portion of the truth. But I love hearing about things from a person who's actually experiencing them. And especially when you're talking about important social movements, I think it's such a good tool. Yeah. It can be such a good tool.
Yeah, definitely. So if you go through a creative phase, do you create a lot of content and just hold it and spread it out over time, or do you just release it? Or how does that work for you?
For me, with YouTube in particular, because that's where I spend most of my time, most of my work, if I have a fantastic day where I'm like, I have 3 things that I have fully formed ideas and I'm going to do it and I film it all, cool, good. I'll try to get them edited as kind of quickly as possible. And I used to just put them all up day after day. So it'd be like 3 in a row. And now just because of how social media works and how the algorithm works, they kind of appreciate consistency. And I like not having the pressure on myself of thinking like, oh, it's been a week since I put up a video. I've got to come up with something. So now I'll save them and kind of pace it. And it's, I can take more time off that way and not worry about it and not be so hard on myself about not working on that or whatever it is. So yeah, I kind of store it up for a little bit.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I'm just trying to figure out this whole TikTok thing because I feel like I've been very consistent with the podcast for 2 years. My episodes have always been out and I've done extra episodes, but this thing of like, now I have to come up with TikTok content regularly. And I'm just allowing myself to be in that process. And it's interesting too that I'm taking this TikTok business class and I think the listeners will really identify with. So I'm curious if you will too, that the person who's leading the class has had a very linear experience. If I join TikTok here and this is what I do, and it's all about TikTok business stuff. So obviously they're very successful. And so their framework is, this is what I've done. If you do what I do, you will be successful, as opposed to some of us need to think about what our process is. Some of us need more time. That doesn't work for everything. And I often find myself in the minority and feel like I'm the one that is the one going, well, that doesn't work for me. But I feel like I'm the naysayer. And I've shared a little bit of what some of my discomfort of what they're saying is, and even talking about setting goals as far as followers. And like, that just doesn't work for me. What I know to do is to show up and produce content and the results will come. That I don't, it's not about the goal. So that doesn't work for me. And so it's just been very interesting that the downside is that it's not like I can show up and just go like, oh, I'm going to take in this information and this is all really going to fit for me. It means that I have to be very discriminating constantly to decide, is this something that works for you, but not for everybody? It would be like me going like, I've been married for 23 years. So if you want to have a successful marriage, Joe, I'm going to tell you how I did it and that works for you. And it's like, no, I have to know what makes marriage successful across the board and all the things that might come up to be able to talk about having a successful marriage. And I don't know that's just one of the shortcomings. And so I'm constantly having to be in a state of assessing information. And is this my resistance? Is this because I don't know how to do it? Is this because this isn't a good fit for me? And I think as HSPs, this goes on for us a lot because people just have this idea of going to create content and do this and do that. And it's like, no.
I so agree with that. I've got a friend who is very successful with social media, with YouTube. He does an outstanding job, sets goals, has a video a day, is just so on top of things. I really respect him and his process, but that is not me. Cause he'll, encourage me in that direction. And I'm like, listen, I can't pump out vulnerable things every day, just like pull it out of thin air. It is a process. And I so resonate with what you said about like follower goals and all that. Like if that works for someone, absolutely fantastic. But I don't know. I think probably especially from where you and I are coming from, like our goal is not to be social media famous. I don't know, maybe yours is, but like that's never been I don't think so. Like that's never been my purpose. My purpose has been, how do I communicate this most effectively, that benefits, that, that's enjoyable for me and that I feel is real and I think could be good for other people. And I think it's a process to figure that out. Like it's going to take time and it might be easier for other people, but I think it's so much more rewarding if you're true to how you are creative, if you're true to how you want to process things. And I think it's great to take that time.
Well, for me, because I come from a heart-centered place, it's about connection. It's about vulnerability. It's about sharing.
Exactly.
That's coming from a heart-centered place. And I can't teach you how to do that. I can't say, do this and do that. And then that's how you're going to have vulnerability. I mean, I can talk about it, but
3 steps to,
and so I think it is really different. And I have judgment. I have lots of judgment about lots of things. And when I say that, it's more like, I wouldn't go and tell somebody, but like I have judgment that's really lacking in this training. The awareness that there are lots of ways to do things, and based on what your niche is and based on neurodiversity, that, again, it's like, this is what works for this person. And there are some things that I can learn to help me get structured, but a lot of it doesn't work for me. And if I didn't have the awareness that I do, I would probably feel really bad. And there's somebody in the group that is constantly overwhelmed. And I think it's because they don't have the awareness that this is not an approach that's effective for them.
Yeah, I think that, I think that makes a lot of sense. And there isn't one size fits all, especially with this kind of stuff. I mean, people are sometimes just coming at it strictly for business. Sometimes you're coming at it strictly for self-expression. Sometimes it's a mix of both. And you got to find what works for you. I think it's really, I don't know, when I've seen like how-to content, I used to be like, okay, now I have to do that if I want to be successful, if I want to be successful. And then when that didn't work, I would get really frustrated and like down on myself and like, you don't even belong in this industry or on this platform or whatever, because, what you're doing doesn't work. But stepping back and being like, okay, maybe instead of God's gospel, I'll take it as suggestions. Like, maybe try this. Okay, cool. Maybe I tried it and it was awesome. Maybe I tried it and it didn't work. And I'll just put that in the grateful that it works for someone else box, And so kind of sifting through that and realizing it's really all just people's opinions. And it is going to come from different motivations and different backgrounds is definitely helpful for me.
Right. And if you're still listening and you're not on TikTok and you're going like, this is not relatable, again, just like we talked about with Joe's amputation, where is it that you feel like you don't fit in, that things don't match for you? I'm thinking if you're an educator, if you're a therapist and you go to training, if you're learning things, systems are not always set up for sensitive people, that schedules are set up overscheduled and too much stimulation. And we think something's wrong with us and it's about the system. And so where are the places that you feel like you bump up against things? And maybe it's not you, maybe it's the training, your boss, the system. And are there ways that you can figure out what's going to make it more user-friendly for you or to help change the system or the training? So even though we're talking about TikTok and you may feel like that doesn't relate, the content of what we're talking about is extremely relatable.
Yeah. I think you can apply it to many different areas of life. And I have with myself too, right? It's not just about content or whatever. Sometimes it's about how I'm approaching a relationship or a conversation or whatever it is, and personal growth. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. I think the gift that we have as HSPs is we see things from multiple perspectives, that's our empathy and our depth of processing that we see. I see my side, I see your side, I see, the other person's side.
Yes.
And that's where a lot of my judgment comes in, when people just have their perspective and like, this has been my experience, therefore it's applicable to everybody. And it just really irks me.
Oh gosh, that's one of the most frustrating things for me too. Cause I am also the person who like, I can see it from my perspective, but someone disagrees with me. And I also get why they're saying that. And I also get why this other person's saying that. And like hard and fast, like this is it. And this is it for everyone. Just get under my skin, because I'm like, you're missing so many perspectives that could enrich your life and could enrich other people's lives. And especially if you're talking about like any kind of social or political discussion or anything like that, I just get exhausted really, really quickly, because we tend to get pretty tunnel vision when I think, man, so much would be gained if we didn't do that.
Right. Joe, we had talked a little bit about, and it's funny, like I'm loving this conversation. So part of me is feeling like, I don't want to switch gears, but I think I want to switch gears.
Yeah,
I just want to go back a little bit, and maybe let's start with this. So if somebody sees you, do you prefer that somebody asks you about your prosthetic, or you can't speak for every person in the world.
No.
But for you personally, can you share a little bit about maybe some things that people have said that were funny or didn't feel comfortable, and how somebody could approach you? And if they approach somebody that they don't know that's not you, what does somebody do or say?
Yeah, I think that's such an important question, and something I spent a lot of time thinking about over the past couple of years. And I do want to start this off by saying that, like, this is my answer, and I know that other people's answers differ. So, take this as just one person's perspective on this who has experience with it. But I didn't think that being noticed in public as much as I am, being stared at as much as I am, would be as big of an issue to work through as it was. It was really weird. It was really weird going out in public and knowing that everybody was going to be looking at me. It felt unsafe. I almost felt like I'd lost the privilege of being invisible if I wanted to, right? Just like blending in, like I couldn't do that anymore. And it was bizarre. So after I kind of worked through some of that, I got to the point where I'm definitely not, scared to go out in public anymore. I think it's when people are staring and being obnoxious about it, I just kind of think it's funny. Rarely does it ever emotionally really get to me. But what I discovered, and I will say, I think this is true for the vast majority of amputees that I've talked to, I would so much rather someone ask me a question or say something than just sit there and stare and wonder. Because I think, I don't know, when we were kids, we were taught not to stare, which I do think is a good thing. Staring at people is not fantastic, but also questions don't get answered, right? You might just be sitting and wondering something. If you have a question, I think it's fantastic to ask, hey, do you mind if I ask you about, fill in the blank? And for me, the answer is almost always going to be, yeah, absolutely. Like, let's talk about it. Let me tell you this or share this or whatever. So I have had really mostly very positive experiences with that. Generally, people are very respectful, sometimes to the point of you can tell that people don't know what to say or what to do. And I have no problem with that. I totally respect that, because I've been in that position before of being like, is it offensive if I notice the fact that you're missing a leg? So I think some of the best experiences I've had are definitely with kids, because kids will be very upfront about things like, your leg fell off. What happened? How'd that happen? And they're just, I was on a walk the other day, and there was a 12-year-old kid who was riding his bike, and he stopped his bike and was like, your leg's gone. What happened to your leg? And I'm like, I don't know who you are, but fantastic. Let's have this conversation. And I think some of the more challenging conversations that I've had with interacting with strangers, I did a video about this pretty recently, but there was one time that I was in a grocery store, and the person who was checking me out saw that I was an amputee and launched into this was not a 30-second monologue, probably 3 or 4, 5, probably more than that minutes of telling me, no matter what people tell you, you're still worth something. No matter what people tell you, you're still beautiful, even though you're missing a leg. It was so hard to be in that situation, because I'm like, oh, everything you're saying tells me that you think I do feel worthless, that you think I feel hideous, because out with no context whatsoever, you're telling me you don't have to feel that way, and I don't feel that way. And so all you're saying is that you feel that way about me in front of a bunch of people standing, behind me in line. And it was I'm not sure if othering is a word, but it really made me feel different, very distinctly different than than like all the quote unquote normal people. And that's a very uncomfortable feeling. So I think the more you can lean into human connection and curiosity respectfully, I think is great. And I think it's kind of important to do. And again, a lot of people have lost limbs or have physical differences for a wide variety of reasons. And sometimes they really don't want to talk about it. And maybe I might have a day where I don't want to talk about it. So starting with saying, hey, do you mind if I ask you a question, I think is a fantastic way. Because then if someone's good with it, they'll say, and if they're not, they're not. And that's okay too,
I love that. Yeah. And what I'm thinking of the person in this store is project much. It's like it had nothing to do with.
Oh gosh, I know. Seriously.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow.
When I was in college, my first love was a man who is a quadriplegic, and we went to Disneyland, and it meant that I had to, put him into rides and take him out of rides. And, people would always go like, oh, bless you. Like I'd earned my angel wings or something because I was, saving this poor quadriplegic. And if they only knew how significant this first love was for me. And so it's that thing of people just have their own stuff and they put it on you, and man, that's a tough one. Can you share some more stories about what people have said or done, or just things that we probably wouldn't even think about? And one of the things that I saw you do a TikTok about that I never even thought about is, if your weight changes, your prosthetic doesn't fit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I would be like my clothes, like I've got clothes in all sizes of my skinny legs and my fat legs.
Depending on what season it is. I get it. I have those clothes too. There's a lot of things that are like that are just like, oh, I never would have even thought to consider this. That's definitely one of them that, weight gain or weight loss is a lot more significant, because if it goes too far in one direction, I'm not going to be able to walk unless insurance approves another, prosthetic socket, which is thousands of dollars. And so it's very, it's something that I have to actively think about a lot more now. Another thing that I would never think about is how many different kinds of legs to be able to participate in. I don't love the word normal, but I do use it a lot in quote unquote normal life. Like, for instance, I can't wear high heels because the prosthetic legs that I have won't adjust like that. And so I just can't wear heels. I can't even wear like a boot with a tiny little heel because of the pressure that it puts forward. So you could get a leg specifically for high heels. You can get a leg specifically for swimming. I needed a different one for biking because my walking leg wouldn't bend enough. Like, it didn't allow my knee to bend far enough to be able to complete a circle on a bike. And the bummer with that is that insurance will pay for one leg every 3 years. So when I first went to get fitted for a prosthetic, my old prosthetist asked me, do you want to be able to wear high heels or go hiking? Because it's one or the other. It's either you get to be a little bit more active or you get to, wear shoes that you want to wear. And for me, I was like, well, I want to be able to do things. So I went with a more functional leg in that sense. But insurance will not pay for running blades. Like, you can't run unless you have a running blade. Yeah, you need a wardrobe of legs, and it can be very, very, very expensive to get those, and a fight with insurance to get them. I'm trying to think of anything else that's sort of things that I never, ever would have thought of or expected. But those are two of the first ones that come to mind, that you need a wardrobe of legs. It's changing those out. It's a lot of maintenance. When I thought about being an amputee, I thought of pretty specific things, like, obviously, like, okay, I'm going to need a prosthetic leg, check. But I didn't think about how difficult that would be, or what types of legs, or what a big world that is. When I get home, I'll probably have to switch to crutches if I don't want to wear my leg anymore. Okay, that's fine. But you don't think about the fact that every morning I have to assemble myself, and there are multiple pieces to assembling myself to be able to walk downstairs. And every evening there's a cleaning process that has to happen with my leg if I want it to not smell terrible the next day, and be hygienic. And there's just so many little details. And I think the number one thing that I've always told people who are facing amputation is it's exhausting. Living life as an amputee, as a baloney amputee, is exhausting because everything takes exponentially more energy. Getting up to get a glass of water takes a lot more energy. And it's scientific also. It takes 9 to 25% more energy to exist as a baloney amputee. And the higher you go on the leg, the more energy that expends. But making sure that you have time to rest and trying to take care of yourself becomes a lot more important. And the absolutely mentally and physically exhausted all the time thing has gotten better as I've gotten used to this and figured out how to work with it. I'm just about 2 years in, but yeah, living life takes a lot more energy. That's for sure.
Yeah. All the things that we just don't think about. And I had told you I was walking the dog the other day and I saw a dog with a prosthetic, and you and I were talking about the running blade, and I stopped and asked a guy if I could ask him some questions. And then we talked about it. And I think about on Dancing with the Stars a couple of years ago, I don't know if you saw, they had a double amputee and they got special.
Oh, Amy Purdy. She is absolutely incredible. Yeah, I know her. Yes.
Special feet so that she could do turns.
Yeah, exactly.
Just all these things that we just don't even, if we're not exposed to or we don't have a reason to, we just don't think about.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. It's a huge world. And I think there's no way to, I would never expect anyone to know this stuff unless they were in it, but it is also kind of fascinating. It's been an interesting new world to learn about as I go through it.
Bet. We need to wrap up. Is there anything that you want to talk about that I didn't ask you about, or anything in closing that feels really important for you to share?
Even though I said it earlier in this podcast, vulnerability is something I've always been terrified of for a lot of reasons. I spent the first 2 decades of my life, never letting anybody in because it wasn't safe for a lot of reasons. And, I was just a people pleaser. I listened to everybody else. I'm good. I don't need to open up. As I continued through life and faced larger challenges, the isolation that came along with that was crushing. It felt like death. It felt like a very bad place to be in. And it took me years to start playing with vulnerability and maybe taking a step out in this direction or that direction. And I can't tell you how much it's helped me feel connected, be less overwhelmed, not feel like I'm so alone. So if there's anything I could encourage anyone to do is maybe think about vulnerability, think about how you could, if you want to, if there's someone safe to open up a little bit more, or if there's a platform or something you want to put into words, try it in a little way, experiment around with it and see how it feels for you. Because for me, at least, it's been very, very powerful and something I would highly recommend.
Yeah. And you're changing people's lives. I'm really clear about that. You are changing people's lives by showing up and sharing yourselves with us.
That really means a lot to me. Truly.
Yeah, I really mean that. Where can people find you? All of your links will be in the show notes at unapologeticallysensitive.com. Just go to the website, the podcast page, and click on Joe's episode. But why don't you verbally tell people where they can find you or what your handle is?
Yeah, absolutely. So pretty much everywhere you can find me under Footless Joe. If you go to footlessjoe.com, it'll kind of direct you everywhere else. But YouTube is where I spend the majority of my time. So if you just Google Footless Joe or you head it into YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, I'm in all the places. And it is Footless, not Footloose. People have gotten that wrong before. I can understand Footloose Joe would be a great name too, but it's Footless as in missing a foot. And I would love to see you there.
And it's Joe, J-O.
Yes. Oh, yes. Good clarification too.
Joe, I'm sitting here going like, oh, this has just been so yummy. And like, I just want to keep talking to you. And as I was watching the clock get later and later, I'm like, I don't want this to stop. This has just been delightful. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I treasure these kinds of conversations and the people who are willing to have them. So thank you.
Listeners, if you have liked this episode, send me an email at unapologeticallysensitive@gmail.com. If you have questions for Joe and there's enough interest and Joe's willing, I would love to do another interview. So let me know what content you want to hear if you like this. And if there's any questions you want to ask Joe, let me know what they are. And I'm happy to schedule another interview. I feel like episodes are really listener driven. So if you like this, let me know.
Yeah, I would love to be back.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Have a great day.
You too. I really appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Hey again. So I'm curious to know what you thought. I'm just enchanted with this episode. It's interesting. I record these episodes and I do a visual editing before I send it to one of my editors. And then when that editor is done, they send it to Shelly Aaron at Shelly Aaron Productions, who puts everything together, creates the audiograms and the cover art for the podcast. And then I don't really hear this episode until it comes out again. So it's always a surprise to me when I listen back. But I just know how much I really enjoyed this episode. What I'm thinking of is, where are you experiencing loss? Where are you struggling with allowing yourself to be seen? Where is it challenging for you to be vulnerable and authentic? And what are the things that hold you back? What you might do is just do some writing about it, make some lists. Oftentimes it's really helpful to write down what the fears are on one side of the page and then write down what the possible positive outcomes would be. I really would encourage you to follow Jo on social media. She's just incredibly delightful to watch. When I say inspiring, I just think how she shows up is just, I don't know, it's just really nice. I want to use the word yummy, but how many times can I say yummy? If you're struggling with any of these things and you're needing some extra support, please feel free to reach out to me. You can find my contact information at unapologeticallysensitive.com. I work online globally with people. I've got the online HSP course. If you're struggling in any way and you're wanting to have more in your life, as HSPs, we do have struggles and we have so many gifts and so many amazing ways that we can show up, and we're wired for connection. And I don't know, my hope is that everybody who listens to this podcast really has a sense of connection and belonging and can name what their strengths are. Of course, we have struggles and challenges, and I really would love to see people who are feeling stuck and struggling to really find ways to thrive as a highly sensitive person. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're feeling loved and having a sense of comfort. If you're in a place where you're struggling right now, that's okay. Probably won't last forever. It may feel like it's going to last for forever. We can do hard things. We can get through hard things. We are resilient. Thank you so much for being here today and being a listener. I really appreciate you. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.